Displaced Gamers back with another topic. I'm Chris, she is Ginger, and we're talking about a fair price to pay for video games because that seems to be a hot topic these days. Ginger, one of the things I hear the most about is time
Yeah.
versus price. People come in to wherever they're going to buy their games and they ask about a game and they say, "Well, I don't want to pay $60 for this game if it's only 10 hours or 12 hours." Or they buy the game and they finish it in 8 hours and they feel ripped off
Yeah.
regardless of how well made the game was. So, I mean, what do you think about that? Do you feel that you should have some sort of connection of time versus price?
I think it's relative. When I worked in GameStop, I definitely had a lot of opinions about that, and I definitely felt like you got, more bang for your buck if you bought a JRPG. But this is the thing. Not everybody likes those, and a lot of people think they're a complete waste of time versus your money. So you kind of got to figure out what you want. And then I think of other games that I've really, really enjoyed, and that are more indie titles that you just kind of zip through. And I mean, I paid $15 for Transistor, which was like an 8-hour game. Thought it was fantastic. Enjoyed it immensely. And then I think about JRPGs, which are like 80 hours long, and they're like, anywhere between 30 to 100
Yeah,
plus dollars if you buy one that's collectible.
that's true. And to be fair, again, the Japanese RPG, I mean, you could take that well beyond 100 hours. Some people clear 200 hours, truly maximizing a game.
Yeah.
But like you said, not everybody's going to be into that particular genre.
Yeah.
So if somebody says first person shooter is their genre, then does that have a certain bracket, that you need to if you need to fall behind in between, this minimum and maximum time played
Yeah.
in order to make it worth it?
Okay, it does for me. And for the simple fact that I don't like shooters. I'm not good at them, and they usually do not have a storyline that pulls me in.
Okay,
Um,
so all right, stop right there. Storyline on shooters. Many people buy a shooter because they're going to play it online.
right.
Therefore, the time is not really governed by whatever the choose your own adventure style would be in a single player mode because they think, well, I don't really care about that. I'm more interested in playing online.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's where you actually get the real value versus perceived value of a game, which is in that, if you're buying, say, Halo or Call of Duty, and you want the story, then you have to decide if that $60 that you're plunking down on launch day is worth it for that. And then in addition to that, if you're someone who's going to play online, then it's obviously worth it to you. I mean, think of all the people who buy Madden year after year after year when usually it's a roster update and they might tweak some gameplay mechanics, but otherwise it's the same game as last year, but it's a little prettier. And I have never felt that it was worth it to pay that much for games. For sorry, never felt it was worth it to pay that much for a sports game.
Ah, but you don't really play sports games.
Exactly, and it's not fair.
So, I
So
mean, obviously, all right, so obviously I've been wearing a Ducks hat during all of our recordings, and I had a streak going where I was buying the NHL series of video games like in the 90s, like year after year after year. And granted, in that point in time, you couldn't really, even though it was for PC, you didn't have the whole like roster updates and that sort of thing going on at the time. But also the games drastically changed in gameplay year after year after year.
yeah,
And I'm not trying to rationalize it. I'm trying to basically say I was one of the people that was buying a sports game, same game, year after year after year.
yeah,
And it's like, and again, it's just an interest thing. So we've kind of thrown a whole lot of genres out there, but really there may be certain genres that what?
well, there is a genre that is a very good example, and I'll just start off by saying
Do
that
it.
back in my day, the way I reviewed games was how much would I pay for them. So what it kind of boiled down to was if a new game came out and I took it home and I played it or bought it or whatever,
Uh,
and if I beat it really quickly or I thought the gameplay sucked or I thought the storyline was really, really good, that was how I declared value. And that was really relevant for customers coming in the store saying, "Hey, should I buy, insert game here?" And I would say, "You know what? No, I'd say that's worth $40." At which point I have given that game a 4 out of 6 on the price scale.
Right.
And I'm saying, like it's not a bad game, but I didn't really feel like it was worth paying that much for. And I don't want to knock any specific games, so I'm not going to name anything, I'm not going to name anything specifically.
Hmm.
But there were a lot of games that came out that I thought were not worth $60. And it was usually based on a combination of having every customer under the sun come in and go, I just beat this game and it was only 10 hours long and it took me 2 days.
Right.
Oh, well,
So,
sorry.
all right. So, I mean, so are you thinking
Action adventures and platformers.
Yeah.
That is your most tangible example of what is a fair price to play, or I'm sorry, a fair price to pay to play your games. But at the same time, I think that value is very perceptual, I guess, if that's the right way to put that.
Yeah, I understand. I was
Yeah.
expecting the relative, or something like that.
Yeah, value is very relative. Like I would totally pay $40 for Journey. I got that game in a triple pack with two other games for 30.
It's funny, especially collecting retro games.
Oh.
And I just dropped the word collecting because that opens up a whole nother can of worms. But it's funny because you could go to a retail store today and basically say, look around and see what games there were, and they're all $59.99. They're not all $59.99, but the major new titles are all $59.99. And you sit here and say, I'm not going to pay that much. I'm not going to pay that much, for retail for this game. Yet, if you're getting an old game that's on a cartridge, and then you're paying over $100 or even
Shoot,
more,
Xenoblade Chronicles is
you
only
know,
$90.
and some of the people have actually like tell me if you're guilty of this because I think you are. But you go
Sure
into a
am.
store and you see a game and you're like, I'm not going to pay $60 for that. And you look right next to it and there's the collector's edition for $100 and you're like, "Oh, look. It's the collector's edition of it." I almost said it's $100. It's like I don't care what it costs because it's the collector's edition. And you're like, you had me at collector's edition. Have you ever been guilty of that?
Not for a game I didn't care about.
Okay.
But
But there are games that you care about that you don't want to pay $60 for. Well, I mean, you wouldn't pay. You just said so. Use Journey as an example, and you're like, I
yeah,
would pay $40 for Journey. And Journey, you could get it in like what, like a 3-pack, right?
yeah,
That comes with
yeah.
like
It was Journey,
flour.
Flow, and Flower together.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like incredibly cheap. I would pay $40 for Journey by itself.
Okay.
If they released a collector's edition of Journey that came with that amazing statue that released, I would buy
How?
them both together.
Okay. So like, how much? How much? What is the maximum you'd be willing to pay? I'm just gonna just right out of thin air. I'm gonna make a Journey collector's edition. Okay. All right. I could see the pain in your face. All right. So it's Journey for PS4 because I think they just released it for PS4. So you go out, you have the little blue stripe along the top says Journey PS4. It doesn't come in a little pack, it comes in a box. And it comes with a statue and it comes with a scarf that looks just like the scarf like out of Journey, right? And
So,
it's
so
all
you're building this for me right now.
Yes, I'm building this for
You're gonna
this is
send it
just
off
on
and
the
see if they
fly
make it.
collector's edition, right? Yeah. So and so that's what you have, and it's got those two things. I'd want to hype it up more, but I'm like trying to like drive the point home as fast as I can. So it's like statue, scarf, full game, PS4. I feel like it should add something else.
Well, my reasonable ceiling for most collector's games is $150.
That's a pretty high ceiling.
Right, but I've bought a lot of stuff that was $150. And keep in mind, segue, Kickstarter games.
Okay,
So let's see. Did you back Broken Age?
I did not.
Okay.
I don't think I was kickstarting when Broken Age was kickstarted. I can't remember.
What have you backed so far? Like that's a Kickstarter game.
I've backed some newer adventure games off old Sierra games. So like Space Venture from like Space Quest, those guys creating a new game. Quest for Glory series, those creators are making a game. And then more recently, Shenmue 3, the new Castlevania game, Mighty Number 9. That kind of give you a rough idea.
Okay. And how many of those have you bought digital, physical, collector's edition copies of?
Uh, Some of the more recent ones, like the video game more than computer game, I've gone a little bit more. I've gone a little higher in trying to get physical. So like, um, Castlevania, like I think I did a physical for that one, and Mighty Number Nine, I don't think I did. Um, uh, and then Shenmue 3, I definitely did a
Yeah.
physical release. I paid a lot. And in retrospect, I wish I'd paid a lot more for Cosmic Star Heroine because that game looks awesome. Just want to tweet those guys and be like, "Can I just give you more money?" It's like it's been funded, it's been a long time, but here, shut up and take my money. Cliche
Yeah.
phrase.
I'm sure
Um,
that they would very happily accept your money, but they probably wouldn't give you anything extra.
Probably not, but man, that soundtrack sounds good so far. Anyway, off topic. What?
Well,
Anyway, you were making a point about Kickstarter.
and here's the thing. Obviously, we have not backed the same games. I was kind of hoping there was a game that you had backed that I had also backed, so I
Oh,
could be like,
rats.
well, here's me out nerding you with my horrible tendency to buy the most expensive edition I can possibly get. Because when the Ouya was available for pre-order, I pre-ordered it, and then they announced the special edition, which you only had to pay like this much more for, or whatever, or you could swap it. And then it was like, oh, but we have additional bronze-colored controllers you can get too. And I was like, I'll buy three additional ones. So I have my bronze Ouya and my my four controllers that all match my bronze Ouya with my name like etched in the back or whatever. My copy of Broken Age was the box copy that will come that I'll eventually get,
Wow.
and so it came with a t-shirt, a poster, some pins, and a bunch of other stuff, and Broken Age, of
Swag.
course, as well. Heartforth Alicia, I totally am buying the box copy of that, which is going to be a nostalgic throwback as well. Broken Age is a nostalgic throwback,
Mm.
and the box copy of Heartforth Alicia is going to be the same way. The reason I did not back Shadowgate was because all I wanted was the boxed edition, and I couldn't afford it at the time. And I think with all of those, it was like at least 100, possibly $150. And part of it's me being excited to support the game.
Uh-huh.
Part of it's me being an absolute sucker for collectibles.
Right. The point I was making earlier.
Yes. But it doesn't mean I don't care about the game. I don't like you insinuating that.
I wasn't trying to insinuate that. I don't think I ever tried to insinuate that. I was just saying, like, even if you really care about the game and you go into a retail store and all you get, this is again tying to collector's editions, is just the game in a snap case, or even just downloading the game for the same amount of money and not getting anything physical and just
Yeah.
having it there on your machine. Like you feel like you are getting more when you buy these collector's editions because you're getting more physical stuff. But then if you take all that away and you say no, just focus on the game, you're like, I don't really feel like I want to pay $59.99 for this brand new game. Now,
Yeah.
and you ask like, I mean, what really is 60? I mean, we've paid $60 for games in the 90s,
Yeah. Oh my
when
gosh,
the
I think I
dollar
paid
was
70 or 80 for Mortal Kombat on it was Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 on the Super Nintendo. I think it was $70.
well, and you remember like I did not buy an N64 when it first came out, but I do remember working in a Toys R Us at the time and saying like, "Oh my gosh, these cartridges are expensive."
Yeah.
And some of the later Super Nintendo cartridges, it was the same thing, and it was just like, well, that's just how it was,
Yeah.
and you were lucky if you could, and this is also dating us a little bit, you could rent games back then and try
Yeah.
them before you bought them, um, but bringing it back more into the present, I mean, there are so many games available today, and so you see that $60 price tag and you think, I have a backlog of games that I can play,
Yeah.
and we live in an era where it really pushes the latest and greatest rather than what's good and what's bad.
Yeah.
So that same game that's not going to be as popular because it's not brand spanking new months down the line is going to drop in
Yes.
price. And if you're a PC gamer, you could live entirely off humble bundles,
Yeah.
and have a ridiculous amount of backlog games that you're never going to play, probably. So,
Maybe. Most
yeah,
likely.
depending on how much of a recreational spender you are when they come about. So, why do you pay $60 for a game? Any game. Straight retail, normal edition, no special stuff, no frills, spills, or chills. It's just the game.
Yeah.
Because you want to play it as soon as it came out,
Yes.
right?
I
Is there
mean,
any other reason?
no. Well, if you're a collector, then it's because you want to make sure you have a mint edition copy.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I'll buy. I would make sure that I buy release editions of, like Atlas games to make sure that I get the kind that comes with the extra CD for free packed in. And I mean, oh my gosh, when I used to work in store, you pre-ordered the games because, especially, I'm going to speak to a moment specifically to JRPGs because those are the ones that really corner the collectible market
That's
and
for sure.
they always come with free stuff if you pre-order them. Almost always, they almost always come in a box set. And I mean, I had two or three very close customers, and between the four of us, they were like my pre-order buddies. We all ordered the same games, and obviously they send you an extra for like every so many that get ordered.
Hmm.
And I would get in, six collector's editions of, say, Ys Chronicles 1 and 2 for PSP. And what did I do? I dug through every single one of those and made sure that those copies that they were getting had zero dents or smushing on the boxes. And, you would have customers come in the store and say, oh, I wanted this collector's edition, but it's been opened. Or, oh, I wanted this collector's edition, but now the packaging is damaged. Oh, used games. Oh, all you have is a greatest hits disc, and you have the original Black
Oh my
Label PS2
gosh.
game.
No, I'm not laughing at those people. I'm
How
laughing
much would you
because I'm
pay for
like,
that,
well,
Chris?
to this day, I have a copy of Kingdom Hearts on PS2 with the greatest hits disc inside the regular case. It hurts.
You should go to a retro game store and see if you can get that swapped.
Oh
But
man.
the tricky thing is, would the disc you get back be mint? And it's hard to say. So gaming, fair price to play for games, to kind of bring it back for a minute. It's very much in the eye of the beholder whether a game is worth it.
Right.
For a lot of people, games like Call of Duty and Madden are all worthwhile because of
That's what
the
they played.
online components of
Yes,
them.
and well, yeah, and the
Yeah.
online components.
And like I'm terrible at both of those games and would rather not play them with other people ever because I'll just get angry and bitter. And but storyline wise, I'll play them, but I'll run through them in about 10 hours and then I will feel completely ripped off. So like I wouldn't want to pay more than $30 for one, and that's only
Huh.
if I'm playing it with somebody else.
So you touched on something else. Going back to multiplayer, when I was originally saying, why would you pay $60 for all this? It's like, I imagine there are quite a few people who enjoy Madden and enjoy Call of Duty and enjoy Street Fighter, for
Yeah.
instance. And it's pretty much like if a new game comes out and everyone's jumping ship to go to the new game to play it online, it's like, well, do you want to be left behind?
Do you really want to be that poor little loser with last year's sports game?
That's right. You just can't keep up with the big heads, right? It's like, oh, I gotta get the latest version.
Yep.
So I can see like people probably being like, I don't want to say guilted into it because it's not like you have well, you might have friends who are like, seriously, you don't have the latest one. You're
It's
like,
just peer pressure. I
it
mean, what it
is.
boils down to is everyone else bought Madden 2016 and you still have Madden 2015 and you want to play with your friends, but they're all playing Madden 2016 and you can't. And it's like, well, looks like I'm going to spend $60 this week because my weekly habit just got ruined. And
Yeah.
I mean, just to throw this out there, I've never played MMOs because I was like, I don't buy into the subscription method and blah, 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 blah. And now I'm like, man, MMOs are such a cheap, feed to your addiction. $15 a month and you can play as much as you want whenever you want. And
Right, and by nature, I mean they just go and go and go and go and go.
they're technically the cheapest games you can buy.
So it's like you don't really rate those with hours. I haven't really played an MMO, but I'm a big player of Diablo 3,
Yeah.
and I don't even want to add up all the total character hours that I have on that, Because I mean, and the funny thing is, the game is like really short, relatively speaking, for somebody who's played a lot of Diablo, and most of your gameplay, if you're a fan of it, comes end game because
Yeah.
that's totally another part of gaming is end game when you've gone through the structured story order
Yeah.
part of the game and now you're just in freedom mode and just doing whatever you want. And especially if it involves other people playing, then I mean it just goes on and on and on for as long
Yeah.
as you want it to.
That replay value.
Yeah, you
And that's a
start.
big part of what makes a game worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on another point, which is replay value. It's like sometimes games go on and on and on, like an MMO or Diablo or whatever, but sometimes they have a finite beginning and end.
Yeah.
And so then you have to decide, okay, well, I mean, look at classics. Look at arcade classics like Galaga or Miss
Yeah.
Pac-Man and those kind of games, right? I mean, probably wouldn't pay $60 for those in this day and age.
No,
But they sure have a heck of a lot of replay value.
yeah. Oh, Galaga. Yeah.
I
I
used to
have
own a
Galaga on
Galaga
my.
arcade machine. I mean,
And
that was
how
how
much
much
did you pay for that?
I paid about $150, which is
Oh,
pretty
that's really
cheap.
cheap.
Yeah. But that was also like over 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So
Still, that's not a bad deal.
it
Arcade
wasn't.
machines are expensive. Was it the table kind?
No, it was not a
Oh,
cocktail time. It was an upright.
I want one of the cocktail
I
ones.
got one of those, and I'm getting off topic. I had a Paperboy arcade machine with the handlebars and stuff like that.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah, that was a lot of fun. I'll talk about my arcade game some other day.
Yeah, we'll
But
have to do
anyway,
that.
getting back on topic,
Yeah.
Galaga, you were saying, what were you saying?
Oh, well, actually, what I was going to mention is so I was going to mention Galaga. I wasn't going to mention Galaga specifically, but I was going to go back to other old games. So, um, value.
Yes,
We'll just go with original Mario. So
wait,
you had a
what? Original Super Mario Brothers?
yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Maybe you were a huge fan of Mario Brothers and not Super Mario Brothers, but anyway, go ahead.
No, not that one. But like so Mario, Nintendo, bam, right? So you had a Nintendo and Mario growing up.
Yeah.
Then the Super Nintendo era comes around and they make wait, is the original Mario in Mario All Stars? I believe it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mario All Stars. Did you buy that game again? Quite possibly. Oh look, now the Wii's out, and guess what's available for download? Mario. And it's like, oh, you have a DS, you can get it on there too, and it's pretty inexpensive. And then it's like,
You could buy it
and
on
then you're like,
GBA. Don't forget, you could also get it on GBA.
yeah.
And
And then you're
they
like,
had like Super Mario Brothers Advance. And it was off by sorry, that's a side topic. Anyways,
well,
keep going.
but yeah, and then you realize that man, I'm 30 and I have all this expendable income, and you know what I really miss having? An original Nintendo and an original copy of Mario. And then you go and buy that, or in my case, you have a Superboy. It's just like, yeah. And how much money did you just spend on a game that
You bought it
you,
again and again and again.
yeah, and I mean,
Well,
I totally buy multiple games. Like I've bought Okami. I have it on PS2 and I have it on Wii. I have not bought the HD version, although I want to. I just haven't because I don't need to. But I believe so strongly in supporting that company and that franchise
mhm.
that I have bought it in every iteration that has come out.
So, okay, let's talk about Final Fantasy for a moment because that franchise has had more like
Re-releases,
re-releases and also
masters.
remakes and remasters that I can keep track of. And it's funny because if you asked me like, well, Chris, I was giving you an example of Super Mario Brothers. What is a game that you've purchased multiple times? And I would without a doubt say Final Fantasy IV because
Okay.
it's come out on just about everything and for some reason I kept buying it. I mean, and if you, I mean, but to be fair, it's been relocalized, retranslated, relocalized, and some of the gaming mechanics have been tweaked, and certain dungeon things have been changed or added, and certain art assets have been altered.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny because, especially with JRPGs, not to stay on JRPGs too long, but those games really hit you like right in the heart.
Hmm.
So you
If you're a
really
fan of narrative, yes.
well, you love certain things about them. Well,
Yeah.
even not well, here's non-narrative stuff, right? So Final Fantasy IV comes out for the Super Nintendo. And it's called Final Fantasy II in the United States. So that was my first that was actually my first Final Fantasy game that I
Oh,
played.
well,
Was on the Super Nintendo.
whatever. Mine
Um
was Final Fantasy.
oh well, I was a Dragon Warrior guy, so you can keep your Final Fantasy. um and and so I played it on that. So eventually it gets released for Game Boy Advance down the line. Now there
Hmm.
was a PlayStation, release as well,
Yeah, Dawn
but
of Souls, I believe it was called on Game
I think
Boy.
that was 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Oh, Dawn of okay. Well, anyway, so 4 and it gets released for PlayStation, but I don't pick it up at the time. So my next um, experience of it is buying it for GBA. And I
Hmm.
think I also managed to pick up a cheap copy of it on PlayStation because why not about
Yeah.
that time? And then it's kind of and so then you start comparing it to the original release. So you say, well, it's the PlayStation version has loading times and the GBA it obviously doesn't have the Super Nintendo sound chip. And that's a big deal. But like I and my Super Nintendo was stolen from my parents' house with Final Fantasy II in
Oh
there. So
no.
I couldn't load up my old one again until I started recollecting Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Um, but just kind of zooming forward a bit, like I kept buying it over and over as it would come out for another platform. They released it on PSP, as like an Ultimate Collection, and
Yep.
I got that. But then I got a Vita, and I'm like, man, I wish I could play it on my Vita because it has such a nicer screen. Oh, look, it's on the
It's digital.
PlayStation Store. I can download it. I can buy it again. And it's like, how much money have I paid for Final Fantasy 2/4?
And was it worth it?
It was to me. Now, to be fair, Final Fantasy 2, I didn't buy that either. It was actually a
Yeah.
friend's game. He loaned it to me, and he loaned it to me in like 1992, and it was stolen in 1999. And right about that time, I bumped into him in college and said, "I still have your copy of Final Fantasy 2." He was like, "Oh, you can have it," but I never saw it again because it was
Yeah.
stolen before I got to see it. So that's kind of a big side story, but it's basically coming down to what are the things that you love and you're willing to buy the same thing, relatively the same thing, again.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like now the place where and I also bought the DS remake, the 3D version.
Oh.
Yeah. So there's another one. I didn't add all this up before. I'm just ad-libbing it right now. Like, how
Yeah.
many times did I buy it? And the place where I stopped was they released it. They released the 3D version for Steam, and I think it runs at like 12 frames per second.
Isn't it available on? No, wait, I don't think that
Eh,
one is. I think the
On
original Final
like
Fantasy is on iOS.
Yeah, actually, I think there's more than just the original now. Like
I
more and
think
more
there's a
stuff is
few
there's
that
still
they've ported over.
right. You can play Final Fantasy VII on iOS now.
Yeah. And that was like, and I mean, a large part of me buying those games is just trying to support JRPGs. I
Uh
mean,
huh.
the
Now,
Lunar, I totally bought the remake that came out for PSP box set with all the bromides,
now
so I
here
didn't have to
comes
get
the
bitter
flip
again.
side of it. Okay, so if you keep buying remakes and remasters and reissues of the same game that you've already bought, you can't complain that they're not making new games if you're part of the problem. That was my
Yeah.
take. Yet you're saying, "Oh, but you're supporting them by 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 paying again."
Well, I would say that I'm supporting the genre, not necessarily like that specific game.
So do you feel in this age that the genre needs to be supported?
For JRPGs, yes.
You do?
They still don't sell very well. Well, JRPGs are very ironic, and I think part of it has to do with the fact that their user base is so finicky because they're like, "Oh, well, I wouldn't pay $60 for this game." And then, 2 years later, they're like, "You know what I want to buy? This one game that I meant to buy and I never did." And then they go into, like a GameStop or they go on eBay and they're like, "Oh God, it's, $160. What happened?" Oh, well, nobody bought it. It got discontinued. They sold it, never printed it again, and now it's worth, insane amounts of money. Like Xenoblade Chronicles was a GameStop exclusive when it came out.
Huh.
Nobody, like very few people pre-ordered it, and it came out. Nobody bought it because they wanted to wait for the price to drop,
Huh.
and then it never did. The game got discontinued. It sold out, and then GameStop ordered another print of it and started selling them used.
Right. Well,
Um,
roll it back like a little over 10 years prior to that and you have Earthbound for Super Nintendo,
Another
which I
classic
believe even
example.
got promoted in Nintendo Power even still. But it that was one of those cusp of a new console type times as well. So you had all these boxes of Earthbound laying around that nobody was buying, and it gains a fan following. it grows, it grows, it becomes a cult hit, word of mouth, word of internet, and people are like, I must get Earthbound, and the price has gone up, and then finally Nintendo releases it on Virtual Console or whatever it is, and people are still paying good money to get the cartridge. I
Yeah.
mean, just the cartridge, paying
Yep.
pretty good money for it.
Hmm.
So it's one of those like Japanese RPGs or even non-Japanese RPGs, just certain games with certain, story appeal like that sometimes. Like they become a gem at
Is
some
it the
point.
nostalgia factor? Is it the gameplay? Is it the
Right.
story?
And
Like,
it's a combination of all of it. And so maybe you have a much smaller group of people that are willing to buy that game in general, and maybe it's long past its retail popular time,
hmm
but you have a huge hit on your hands that everybody has to have a copy of.
yeah.
Everybody that plays in that particular genre. But at the
hmm
time it came out, they were playing something else.
Yep.
Or like Japanese
Well,
RPGs take a long time to play.
yeah.
So,
And I spent
um,
so much money when I worked at GameStop buying literally like every single thing that came out. It was just like, oh God, I have to make sure I have these. Here's my fall schedule. And every November it was horrifying because it was like $400 just gone like that to games.
mhm.
A lot of them were collector's editions. I know I have a problem. But the JRPGs specifically, I always made sure that I ordered them far in
Okay.
advance to make sure that I got a copy, that, if there was any collector's bonuses stuff, that I made sure I got that stuff. And a large part of it was just me as a collector knowing that those games have a
You're
higher potential to accrue value.
okay. Okay, that's fair. Collecting. But I was about to say you're setting me up for one of the greatest segues of all time, which is backlog. So if you have a ton of Japanese RPGs, like when are you going to play all these Japanese RPGs that you bought?
When my legs are inevitably broken by someone coming after me to collect my debts.
That sounds
Um,
like a good time.
I won't be able to go anywhere. No, so funny story, and this is really terrible, and I probably shouldn't say it, but like the other day, I decided to do a smorgasbord, and I picked 3 games out of my collection that I wanted to kind of sample for the
Which
evening.
were
They were Darksiders, Killzone, and Muramasa the Demon Blade for Wii. And it
okay.
ended up being a very disappointing evening because my Wii remote was dead, so I couldn't play Muramasa. I didn't get around to Darksiders because I started playing Wind Waker instead on the Wii U. And
Uh-huh.
then I played Killzone, Killzone Liberation, whichever one is the one for PS4. I was playing Killzone, and no. And so I moved on to the Wii. But the reason I'm telling you this is because this is what happened. I was like, oh, I'm gonna play this game, and then I grabbed it and it was still sealed. And so I put it back. And it happened 3 times. Like I picked 3 different games and I was like, I'm gonna play this game tonight. Oh, it's sealed. And like put it back. Because I have never played it before. And I was like, well, I might as well play some of these games that are open before I, you
Right.
know, play ones that are sealed, because what if they go up in value?
But again, that's backlog,
It's
and kind of
terrible.
kind of like bringing up the whole humble bundle thing. You walk in and going all the way back to what we first started talking about. You walk in, you're like, this game is $60. But if you've been in video games a long time, you probably have so many games at home that you've bought and you've just never even played because you thought, "Oh, this is a really good game. I need to buy it," or it's a retro game, or "Oh, I finally have all 6 Mega Man games for the original Nintendo." It's kind of like, but they're too busy sitting on a shelf.
Yep.
I need to pay $60 for this. Some people fall into that trap, but at the same time, it's like
Yeah,
you really need to play the cutting edge game right now. Can't you
yeah.
like even if you want this game that's out right now, can't you
Yeah.
go to your backlog and pull a game off your shelf and appreciate it as a game instead of a collector's item, as a game that you have fun playing, and wait just a little while to pay less than $60
Right. And
for it?
and so for me, no. Not when it comes to JRPGs, and not even when it comes to physical copies of games. So
And I
mild
was saying,
segue.
I was saying that in general as well, because there are
Yeah.
certain games where I'm like, yes, I want to have that day one. I've been waiting for 3 years for X
Yes.
game, or in certain cases that of games on Kickstarter, been waiting 10 years or
Yeah.
more. So that's a different story. But
hmm
what were you about to get into?
Oh, I was just gonna say, value. What creates value? What makes it a fair price to pay for a game? And part of the reason I've been slowly converting over to buying things digitally is because I am upset that games don't come with manuals anymore. Why should I
You're
pay
not alone.
for this physical disc with this little chintzy plastic case with artwork that may or may not be amazing? And artwork, good artwork will, yeah. Anyways, there's no manual. What am I doing at that point? I'm basically paying for a physical game that I cannot take anywhere with me, that is not convenient to transport. And I'm speaking more specifically to like Vita and DS games.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, the convenience factor of having something digital is huge in terms of value now for me because so many things have been stripped down from your physical copies. And so now I'm on like extremes. I either don't even want to bother buying it physically, or it's going to be an insane collector's edition that's like stupid expensive because collector's editions and I want to collect it.
Hmm.
And I mean, value there. I mean, what is that? You know, and I've moved a lot to digital in terms of buying games for like my DS and my Vita, just because it's so much easier.
Yeah, I mean, download versus digital on its own is a pretty major topic. Um, but certainly when it comes to paying for games, it's an interesting crossroads that you stand at when like, do I want to pay more and get a physical copy that may come with extra items, or do I want the convenience factor? Do I want to pay less? And buy a digital version? And even, if it costs the same exact money to download it versus go out and buy a physical copy, then it really is all about, like, to a certain degree, laziness. If you're
Hmm.
if you're on if you're on a console that you have hooked up to a display of some sort instead of a portable,
Yeah.
because then you say, well, I may want to load this up on a whim, and as crazy as this sounds, I don't want to stand up and go take out my current game and put in another game
Yeah.
just to play it for a few seconds. I want to
Oh
have it
yeah.
on there. And certainly for portables, one of the greatest examples is, I believe you have a physical copy of Animal Crossing
Yes,
for
I.
3DS, and I have a downloaded copy. So that meant that I could walk somewhere with my physical copy of Link Between Worlds in
Hmm.
my 3DS, and then pop over to Animal Crossing at some point as I'm on the go, and, like, oh look, I street passed with these three people who have Animal Crossing villages. I'm gonna head in there and check out the relative thing. I don't know how many people play Animal Crossing who are watching this right now, but basically, like, I already have that software on my 3DS, and I can just switch over to it
Yeah.
instead of saying, oh, I feel like Animal Crossing, and, like, fumbling out like a little, like, plastic container of cartridges or something in my pocket and, like, switching it out on the fly or something. You
Yeah.
know.
No, that's a large part of the reason why I've moved, and especially for, well, when I say moved, I mean moved from physical copies to download copies, especially with the 3DS and especially with those games that I call maintenance games. And I realize that's not a genre, but I call them maintenance games because they're games you just pop in and check on every once in a while. And Animal Crossing and Tomodachi Life are prime examples of that. And they're both games I bought physically, and they're both games that I deeply regret having bought physically because the type of game that they are
Hmm.
is so much more catered to keeping on your DS and like visiting every once in a while. Whereas most games are like one and done. You play them, you're done, you move on to the next game. Animal Crossing is something you play for 3 months like crack, and then you stop for a few months, then you go back and your town's overgrown, and all of a sudden you're back in it.
Yeah. So, all right. So, staying on topic with pricing, um, when I first considered the fact that there was an ability, you now have the ability to either download a game or get a physical copy. The collector in me was like, "Duh, physical copy." And
Yeah.
this was several years ago, you know. And then you immediately think, "Oh, well, the physical copy should cost more because you actually get something." Yet at the same time, that's really not how capitalism works.
No.
Because what if somebody said to you, okay, that's fair, collector's editions or even just non collectors, you just want to have that artwork and a little manual and stuff like that in there. But then what if they came at you and said, okay, well, what about Animal Crossing? You can buy the physical copy on a 3DS cartridge for $35, or you can get the downloadable version for $40.
Because it's so much better
$5
to just have on
more.
your DS at all
Because
times.
don't you want to have it on your 3DS at all times? And you're
Yeah.
like, now I'm paying. I hope Nintendo's not listening. Now I'm paying more because I want to have it on my system all the time.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Like some games, I think it would actually be feasible to charge more for them to get them digitally than a physical copy because of certain features that you get. But I guess that's why they all cost the same across the board. It's probably just, and I was in the same boat as you. Like for the longest time, I was like, why would you ever buy a digital copy of a game when you could get it physically and know that you have those know that you have your physical copy and oh well, if the DRM ever happens and conspiracy theories, we're going to lose all of our stuff. Because that was, one of the big things against digital. It's like, oh, if any of these companies ever go under, you're losing everything. Which, hey, they did erase the PT demo from the PlayStation Store, but
Right?
for the most part, that's not really the case, or at least it's not something that we think about right now because we haven't had like I guess a gaming bubble burst where that sort of thing has happened.
Right.
But
It's probably on. Well, we won't talk about that yet.
yeah,
Were you going to say something more about that?
not really. No, that's
Okay.
pretty much it.
All right. So my next point was going to be indie games. We talked about $60 in AAA. Then you hit indie games, which is pretty much like everything under $60.
Yeah.
Everything under the AAA point, and it's a very wide spectrum, and it tends to bounce around a little bit,
Yeah.
depending on depending on certain things. But one subpart of that is, oh well, so and so released this game. I'm releasing a game similar genre, similar gameplay, therefore I can charge the same. Or I feel like there's more effort in my game, I can charge more.
Yeah.
Or I'm already known in the indie scene, I can charge more. Or I'm trying to get into the scene, should I charge less?
Yeah.
You're pretty familiar with indie games. Would you say that's true?
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm an expert by any means, but I'm definitely a fan of following stuff on Kickstarter and then also just reading kind of into the indie scene. I like indie games. I like them. I find them more beautiful and more digestible than most of your AAA titles that come out. So in other words, the cost doesn't really matter to me so much as the quality of the game and the story. And I
Uh-huh.
kind of feel like indie games do, and maybe I'm just being really, really biased here, but I kind of feel like indie games have typically better stories and they have more experimentation with art styles, which is a really big thing to me and
Uh-huh.
helps, for whatever reason, helps keep me engaged. So to me, the value there is higher. Now, on that note, I very rarely pay full price for any game that's indie unless I'm kickstarting it.
Yeah.
I almost always end up buying them in a Steam sale because I'm impulsive.
I think okay, so I want to talk about a couple of stereotypes briefly, and one is that the AAA games that have that $60 price tag, I think at some point years ago, gamers started really supporting indie games because they really did feel that the $60 AAA titles were aiming for your wallet and trying to almost give you a movie trailer.
Yeah,
Basically, it's like all we have to do is get them into the movie. Once they're there, they've already paid for the ticket, and we're good to
yeah,
go. Um, and so a lot of people would kind of discount a lot of the creative talent behind some of these AAA games. Yes, there were some that were just like thrown into stores that used yesterday's engine and just like skinned a few things and put in a minuscule writing plot and hired like so and so's brother to do some voice acting. But like I don't really think that happens as much of as the like we're going to put as much money into this game as possible, because it has to be big. It has to stand above the rest. But there's
yeah,
still a creative team that's in there that does a good job. And there are people that really love those kind of games. But at the same time, there is the homemade feeling and the like all passion, you know, games that comes from a lot of like indie developers.
yeah,
And so a lot of people that support indie games, they'll buy indie games sometimes not because they're even interested in playing them, but because they're indie games.
yeah. Because they want to support the developers and they want to kind of help them. And I definitely fall into that camp
Right, but at the
of
same time, you also said that sometimes you don't buy any of those until they
Like
get to be like.
it's very rare. I think the last one I bought full price was Transistor, which I pre-ordered on PlayStation 3.
Did it come out for PlayStation 3?
It might have been PlayStation 4, I forget. They sit
Okay.
right next to each other and I don't really pay that much attention.
It's just all one console.
Yeah, it might as
Everything
well be, except that they're not backwards compatible.
different topic.
The different topic for another time. But no, I don't remember. I think it was PlayStation 3, but now that I think about it, I think it was PlayStation 4. Yeah,
I
no, it
have it
was
on
PlayStation
PS4, and I
4.
think it's only PS4,
It's
as
only
well
on
as
PS4.
PC. And they may have it on 360 now. I'm not sure.
But I pre-ordered that game, and I haven't pre-ordered, like off the top of my head, I haven't pre-ordered anything since. But I totally pre-ordered and bought the Journey collection.
Did you
Never
play?
bought it digitally.
Did you play Bastion?
No, I did not,
Oh, okay,
actually.
because that's Super Giant, and they did Transistor as well.
Right. Same,
Which
similar art style.
so that kind of gets me into. I mean, if you love a particular indie company, would you be likely to just buy whatever they release based on name?
Yeah,
There was a time.
that's me with Vanillaware. I buy
So
every Vanillaware title that
okay,
comes
so
out.
there you go. And the funny thing is, I mean, there was a time many, many years ago in the original NES and Super NES era where people would just buy everything that has Konami on it. And my, how that company has changed.
Yeah.
Um, but going back to the indie field, do you feel like you have a little bit more of a, I guess I'll use the word personal attachment to any given indie company? Do you feel, or do you feel that, yeah, I mean, in this era of social media, you can follow people, developers of these games, and interact with them as the game's being made,
Yes.
you know? And that's totally a different feeling.
And I think that's a huge thing that affects the perceived value for a person. How much say do they have in the development of the game? How much say do they have in the art, or how much just involvement do they have in general in the whole process? It's almost like, I don't really know how to describe it, but it's an investment at that point. Like you're putting a little piece of yourself out there to kind of like help bring the game along.
Right.
I never hopped into the Broken Age forums, but I could have if I'd wanted to. And same thing with Heart for Alicia. Like I could be in there making comments about stuff, but I don't, because I just want the game to come out so I can be happy and play it.
Right. I mean, sometimes people overhype games that they're waiting on. Do you feel that being a part of it increases your hype or makes your expectations more realistic when you see the decisions that they've come to, which is usually a Kickstarter? I'll give you an example. They send out 4 different types of conceptual drawings
Yeah,
or even a render of a character and say, vote on your favorite. And you vote, and maybe yours gets chosen, maybe it doesn't.
yeah,
But now you kind of know what it looks like, and oh, you had your say in that.
yeah.
Um,
I think that definitely. Well, I mean, I know for me personally, that would build the hype for me more than anything else.
okay,
Yeah,
that's fair. I wasn't leaning one way or another, but I thought that you could go either way. Because
yeah,
sometimes if all you knew was, oh, there's a new Mass Effect game coming out or whatever, which is just really, big AAA type thing, and you and
yeah,
you and you think about all the previous titles you've played in a series, and you kind of put together what you hope it'll be because you've been hoping for it for so long. Same thing might be going on, is definitely going on with like Shenmue 3 right
yeah,
now, except
yeah.
now instead of Shenmue being this major Sega thing, it's like no, no, no. It's more of like it's a Kickstarter
For the
thing, and
gamers.
and it's yeah, and like all these huge fans are in on the Kickstarter and like sharing thoughts and ideas, and they kind of have their foot in that pool, so to
Yeah,
speak. So the value, the pricing, like they're truly paying what their fandom will allow them to pay, what their wallet will let them pay, instead
yeah,
of simply going into a store and saying, "Oh, it's done, and I'll pay full retail day one. I'll pre-order."
yeah.
Or whatever.
And
So
that's one of the reasons why I like Kickstarter a lot, because I'm voting with my wallet. Like I'm just like, yes, here, take
yeah,
the money,
and I mean, you
and I
still may
like that
not
a lot.
get something from
Right.
Starter. I mean, even if it gets funded, but at the same time, you're pretty much saying, "Hey, I believe in you." You
Yeah.
know. A lot of people don't like Kickstarter. I've seen a lot of people who say, "Oh, I hate Kickstarter.
Yeah,
I hate Kickstarter, and
I
I hate
love
him, and I
Kickstarter.
hate amiibos." And that's pretty much what runs my life.
Yeah.
Um, so
I hate amiibos, but I love them and I want them all.
right. So I think we've covered just about everything. Um, do you have any other items to say? We've hit all of our major bullet points,
Yeah, not that I
but
can think of.
and we got a little sidetracked here and there, but for the most part, I think we stuck to it, which is
Spontaneity.
I mean, yeah, but in conclusion, I mean, it is rather relative, and it is rather based on each individual gamer,
Yeah,
rather than just here's what the industry accepts. You know,
yeah,
if you're a company, then obviously you're gonna have more metadata on all that and figure out, okay, how do we market this?
yeah.
Seriously, this could make or break
Well,
uh, this
yeah,
particular
yeah.
uh, game launch or even the company, depending on how we do this, especially for indie developers.
Yeah, and you
Um,
definitely got that with shovelware. On like, I mean, that's what we always called it was shovelware, where they make the budget game that's only $30, and it's clearly a knockoff of this other game, but you know it's not going to be as good. But that's why it's only $30. Hey,
yeah,
and then of course we were like, don't, no, don't buy
yeah.
that.
So yeah, so it really does. I mean, for me personally, it does depend. Most of the time these days, I have such a backlog that dates all the way back to like still wanting to pull games out for the Atari
Yeah,
2600. That like I don't really tend to buy most games like day of release, unless
yeah,
it's like the next game in my like favorite line of games. Um, but at the same time, it's if it is one of my favorites, then hi, here I am again. It's time for another Phoenix Wright, you know.
yep. And do you pay for that? Yes, they
Yes,
take your money.
they do.
Did you, this is kind of my, I guess, my parting comment. Did you hear about how much the ET games sold for that were pulled from the landfill?
I didn't really look into it. Why?
Okay, I'm not entirely sure how true this is, but I saw a blurb on Facebook today saying that the ETs that were pulled up, which remember, like, worst game ever or whatever, 100,000 bucks, supposedly. I don't know if it's true, but you know, what is value? What's value?
Yeah,
Kind of hard to
that was a
say.
long time ago that they actually earthed those up.
I
I think it
know.
was it was like a year ago at least, right?
It was a while ago. It was a big
Yeah,
deal, though.
yeah. I mean, I guess in that you're owning a piece of something
It's a
in a
piece of
way.
history at
It's
this point.
I mean, I guess I could. I actually have a box copy of ET. Don't ask me how I ended up having owning it, but like, I mean, I could go put it in my driveway and back over it and cover it with dirt and then put it on eBay. I mean that would not be that would not be honest.
But you could.
But I could. But it's all relative. So what you want to pay. So, all right. I think we're done. We're done. All right. So that concludes another episode of Displaced Gamers, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.